Attention first responders, ready for a new challenge? You can turn your leadership skills into deliciousness by becoming a Firehouse Subs restaurant owner. First responders will receive a $100,000 cash incentive to help open their restaurant. Continue serving after service. Visit firehousesubsfranchising.com today.
Breathing in diesel exhaust fumes is like walking into a fire without a mask. Over time, those toxins lead to cancer. Protect yourself with Magnegrip, the easiest, most reliable exhaust removal system that features a true 100% seal to eliminate diesel exhaust fumes. To get free grant assistance, visit magnegrip.com.
Greetings and welcome to the Women in Fire radio show. Today we're going to be discussing the topic of we ask not because we know not, advocating to show up as our best selves. Thank you to Fire Engineering for allowing Women in Fire to be part of their radio show. I'm a retired Battalion Chief Lisa Baker and the Southwest Region Trustee for Women in Fire. As I mentioned, we're going to be talking about we ask not because we know not, advocating to show up as your best self. Standing up for yourself, the importance of self-advocacy. We need to stand up for ourselves, which we sometimes find hard to do. Being your own advocate means that you ask for what you need while respecting the needs of others. There's a difference between advocating for yourself and bullying someone to get your way. We need to be respectful and kind. Don't be afraid to ask someone for help. Try to help solve the problems. Standing up for yourself can change everything. Being able to speak up for yourself rather than relying on others, having the confidence to say when you don't think something is right. It's about voicing your opinions rather than sitting back and let others make decisions for you. Today I have an excellent panel of guests. I have Megan Sayer, who is a Women in Fire trustee and works for the U.S. Forest Service. I have firefighter Brooke Sims, who is a firefighter in Colorado, Aurora, Colorado. I have Ioana Armstrong, who's the Emergency Management Coordinator for the Forest Park, Georgia Fire and Emergency Services Division. So how can we help ourselves become the best version of ourselves? Anyone?
Well, I guess I can start off. Everyone's So for me personally, it's continually making the effort to learn and grow, either personally or professionally, and challenging myself or, challenging yourself. I have grown the most at times, pretty much when I have gotten out of the comfort zone that I'm so used to. And sometimes it was on my accord and other times I was, kind of voluntold to, but those are the moments that I realized and experienced tremendous growth. And, just read and learn as much as you can. That's what I do. And then above everything else, just also learn how to make sure that you're taking care of yourself, whether that's, in mind, body, or spirit. Like you just, it's a continuous effort, and when you do wake up, you're not going to just wake up one day and be like, oh, all right, that's it. I got it. I'm the best version of myself. And all right, I'm done. No more work. No, like that. The journey has just begun. It's just a continuous process. At least it is for me.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think I agree with what you said. And sometimes it's become the best version of ourselves. Sometimes we need to be able to speak up for ourselves, which I know being a firefighter, female firefighter, and a predominantly male profession, some of us find hard to do is to speak up for ourselves and voice our opinions and letting somebody know what's right and what's wrong and kind of setting the boundaries. So I think that's really important that we learn how to set boundaries with our coworkers and such.
I would like to add to that as well. I think everything touched on is absolutely true. And I know for me, being the best version of myself means being the most authentic version of myself. And so for me, I made a point very early on. And, you know, as a African American woman, is to show up as my authentic self. And that means for me, a big part that I really had to work on was not code switching. And I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with that term, but it is essentially like people of color use code switching when they walk into a room, because we are most likely walking into spaces, especially like professional spaces, where we are the minority in situations. And so oftentimes we'll change our voice and our dialect, and, you know, to seem like we're more educated and just to make others around us more comfortable. And I always tell people, like, I was a communications major, so I know the correct way of of saying things, and I know how to write it very well. However, when I am around my family, right, like we use what we like to call ebonics. And so it's just like, if you are, you know, if you're Mexican and you are talking, you talk Spanish around your family, or if you're, you know, Irish, you know, you have all of these, you know, you speak in your native tongue. And so for my native tongue, I would like to say it's kind of ebonics. And so I make it a point to just show up as my authentic self. And that's one of the ways that I do it. It's just like, I'm not code switching in this space. I know that I'm smart. I'm capable. And so I can still be in these spaces and be my authentic self and talk to people just like I talk to my family, right? Because in the fire service, we're supposed to be a family. So for me, showing up as my best self means that I'm the same person I am when I'm at work, at home, around my children, at church, you know, like in all of these different spaces, I'm that same person. And I don't have to put on a different voice or a different face in order to do it, because it's a lot of energy to try and change like who you are to try and fit in these spaces. And so for me, showing up as my best self is showing up as my most authentic self.
And Brooke, I thank you for sharing that, because I think some people, I'll get you, Megan. Some people don't quite understand that. And there is that where people come to work and, I mean, they'll use these big words and try to be really articulate. And you know, that's not really the person, right? It's like, that's not really who you are. You're using big words that your words aren't even making sense right now. And it's like, I don't know who you're trying to impress right now, but I agree with you. You have to show up as yourselves. And I think I was just with Ioana at her department for a girls camp. And this subject was breached a little bit, but it's just like who you are. You're who you are all the time. And if you're trying to change your personality or anything to please people, then you're not yourself. So thanks for sharing that, Brooke. I really appreciate that. Megan, you were waving. Did you? I mean, you had something to say?
It did. Thank you, Lisa, for having me. I think one of the things, in order for me personally to be my best, it changes. It changes from day to day. I tend to be a perfectionist, 5-time recovering. But to help me become my best, I have to realize that each day that best is different. It's really, there are some contexts that we work in, it's really easy to shine. If everything's in line, everything's going with you, it's really easy to be your authentic self. And then there are days when it doesn't matter what you do, you're just constantly being shadowed. Excuse my language. And sometimes those days, the best I can be is very quiet and very polite. And that's my best that day. And other days, it's like I'm rocking it, I'm killing it, just smashing everything. So I think when I think about being my best self, it deals with a lot of compassion for myself, and then also a lot of just situational awareness of the context I'm operating in, and the realization that maybe the best I can be today isn't the best I could be tomorrow, or the best I could have been yesterday. That it just depends.
Megan, you just kind of said something. I may be going off a little, I may be wrong, but I think in the fire service, I know I did this as females. It seems like somebody's always trying to watch us. They're always watching what we're doing. If there's a fire, it could be across town, let's say, and all radios are going to get turned on to listen to if there's a female as in the incident commander or first due as the engine officer or what have it. And everybody's listening to that female. And I think you were right. I always felt that as a female in the fire service, even if you were accepted, you were always looked at a little bit not a higher standard, but everybody was always watching you. Like no matter what you were doing, someone was watching you. And I'm sure there was a fairly significant percentage of males that maybe wanted you to fail.
I wouldn't say they're not necessarily waiting for you to fail, but when you are in the minority, that you tend to be seen as representing that entire group, right? Working in a male-dominated field, when one of them, messes up, there are 8 million other dudes next to them to be like, oh, okay, that's just him. He's just not particularly great today. But when you're one of the few or the only, and you mess up, there's nobody to counteract that example to show like that's just you having a bad day and you making a mistake. All of a sudden, that mistake is representing every other woman because they don't work with many others. And it's one of those pressures that whether you're the only woman, the only person of color, or the only person of another underrepresented group, it's an added weight on you in trying to be your best. Another pressure. So it's not just you being your best is representing an entire group, whether you like it or not. It's a really difficult place to be in because it's really easy to say, put your head down, just work as hard as you can, do that, and people will respect you. And you don't know necessarily what the woman before you did that made have put a bad taste in their mouth, or what you do is going to set up the next woman. And there are so few of us. It's really easy to get stereotyped and be seen as representing the rest of us.
Juana or Brooke, you have anything to add?
I agree with everything that was said. I think like she touched on, and like you touched on, we're just under a microscope, at times, and sometimes we are the only representative, and that can also put a lot of stress on question what you're doing and how you are handling a certain situation, whereas others might not have that extra undue burden, So I think it's just realizing it and understanding that is something that happens will help us talk about it and hopefully find ways to better handle that situation whenever we are in it.
Megan, you kind of broached a little bit of something about females and such, and I think if you're the only female in the department, it's even harder because you have really no one to turn to in that agency to discuss things. And then there's always that little voice in the back of your head that, can I trust another female to actually tell her something that might have occurred? And then there's the other aspect of people not just wanting to talk about it for the fear of being the outsider. That if I go and say something, then I'm going to be the outsider, that no one's going to like me. I'm going to be the outsider. So it's like, I'll just go with the flow. Especially, I think, if there's no one that you could really speak to something about, if there's no other females in your department, or I think we could probably already all admit that a lot of times females are meaner to other females than we need to be. Brooke, you have something to add?
Yes, I actually I do, and I think that you saying that and touching on this is kind of why this topic is so important. And I think in the fire service traditionally, with being the first female, like the first few, we're all so different though, right? Like even in the fire service. And so just coming in, it doesn't matter. Like, we're just all different, even if it's just the same, ethnicity or socioeconomic, status, like in some form, like we're different, right? But we have to work so hard to get here, to be seen as like worthy of being in this position. And so I do agree that we can't be harder on other women, because of that. And in that, we find it hard to speak up for ourselves, and like, you just don't know what you don't, or what you need, because the first few, they didn't want to ask for anything. They just, wanted to get by. And so like, I remember coming in and being one of three, now two African American females on a department, and coming in and being in academy. I was the only African American person, period, in my academy. And so I was like, I gave up so much for my family to be here and wanted to do this, that I remember going in and like being in the restroom and using clippers to cut off my hair. And because I didn't know any better, right? Like, I was just like, I want this job. I'm fighting so hard. So like, I didn't know to ask if there's a different helmet that would fit my hair better. And, I remember, trying to help another female firefighter who had a kid, that after I came back from a maternity leave, like all of these things that, like, with me breastfeeding online and being being in operations, they were just like, other women have had children on the department before. Like, why am I having to talk to employee relations before I go online? And they don't have a clue of like what it looks like to be in a firehouse. This is like the city HR, and like, they don't have a clue of what we do. And so I'm like on this call and I'm like, ma'am, I don't even know why they sit here. Like, I was thinking like, okay, just, we're going to talk it out in the fire department, and like, we're going to be good. And I'm going to come online. And I was like, okay, well, if you don't know and they didn't come to me directly, like, here's what I need. Or not necessarily what I need. At this point, I was so frustrated. I was like, this is what I want. I want a fridge, because I don't want to put my food in the same fridge. I want to, I need to go out of service for this amount of time, and so like all of these things. But there were women that, I'm obviously, if I'm the first having this conversation with employee relations, like, how many other women knew that was even an option? And that's state law, right? For you to be able to have those things, to be able to breastfeed on the job. And so I was helping another woman, and she was just like, I don't want to ask for those things. And I was like, okay, this is what I did. And, this is who I talked to, but, if this is an option for you, to ask for it. And I think that she didn't want to ask because she didn't want to, seen as other or doing anything that would put any attention on her. And so, that's why those are just a couple of examples that I have of like why speaking on this topic is so important, about like the things that you just sometimes don't know, and we still kind of give each other a hard time. And so hopefully, share this with everybody listen in, so that we can change that moving forward.
Yeah, Brooke, you just mentioned something. It's kind of the mentality of a lot of females and males to some extent too. They get into the fire service and they just want to fit in. They think, especially women, some women, they just think they want to be one of the, so to speak, boys, right? So they're, and in reality, you're never going to be one of the boys. And they're afraid to step outside the box, so to speak, to ask for and advocate for what's the best for them. Like you mentioned, the breastfeeding and such. And I mean, it's sad that we're almost in 2025. We're halfway, almost to the end of 2024, and we still have numerous departments throughout the United States that still have no pregnancy policies. There's still a female firefighter gets pregnant, and they're telling them to write the policy. And you write the policy, and we'll approve it, and not even following the laws and such. So that's a whole nother topic. But it takes a lot to be able to advocate for yourself, because I mean, human nature, I think we all want to be liked. We all want to be, fit in and such, but we also need to have our own integrity and be able to look ourselves in the mirror and know I'm doing the right thing for myself and my family. And as far as fitting in, I mean, how many you want to fit in with people that you probably don't even want to be friends with sometimes. So it's like, Brooke, I really commend you for doing what you did. So what's the best way to advocate for yourself at work? So how do we advocate for ourselves? I mean, what's the best way to go about it? Like, I mean, I think we all know, like, if we see something, we hear the saying, what is it? If we see something, say something, so to speak. Mm-hmm. But like, how do we, I mean, we all probably know we see things, or we witness people see things, or they've come and said they've seen things, and you're like, well, did you go and say anything? Did you go do anything? Well, no, it didn't offend me, or it didn't bother me, or, well, it did bother you because now you're coming to me telling me about it. So what's the best way, or how could we get more females and even males that are listening to want to advocate for themselves, to make them a better person, and to just do what's right?
First and foremost, hello, everybody. This is Chantell, Orange County Fire.
Hi, I'm Chantell.
So sorry I'm late, but just starting off on that, the best way to advocate for yourself is to, I think it's as simple as speaking up. Like, and it's not always simple, because I know when I first started, I had somebody, a higher up, who is a captain now, tell me, either you can be a hoe or a B word, pick one. And it was a lady, somebody I'm supposed to be looking up to. So it's like, it's important to speak up. If something is uncomfortable, you have to stand up for yourself. Me being a minority in my department, we have a large department, 16 to 1,700 people, and I could possibly count on my hands how many African Americans there are in the field. So I remember somebody said something about my hair one day, and it's like, this is how I wear my hair. Just because it's something you're not used to doesn't mean, it's no wrong. Like, it's not wrong. You know what I'm saying? Just because it's something that you're not used to or out of your norm does not mean it's wrong. But I had to speak up for myself and let them know, like, in my culture, this is okay. It was something as simple as braids. So after I spoke up for myself, they learned that, oh, okay, she has a voice. We're not going to be able to run over her like we did such and such before, and such and such before. It's like, we can't mess with her like that. It's like, no, you cannot, because I'm always going to speak up, and I'm always going to defend myself, because if I don't do it, who else will?
Exactly. And it takes a lot of courage to do that. But it takes the courage to do it, and it also takes the courage to know that when you speak up, hopefully those that come after you won't have the same problems as you had.
Exactly.
But that's not always the case, as we know. And then, like, a lot of times when we advocate for ourselves, the others may become withdrawn and distanced from the female, because now they're afraid to say anything around the female that speaks up for themselves, that knows what's wrong and says, this is wrong, stop. Or, no, I could do this, like with your hair. No, I could wear my hair this way. So it takes a strong person to want to do that, to know that you're probably not going to be the most liked person, and that the others will probably become withdrawn and distanced from you. And you're maybe even called some unflattering names, but So how do we feel this is, and how can this be changed? How can we change the culture? I guess culture is the right word, so that this doesn't happen. That everyone should, as we know, right? You're in the academy, and they say, "Oh, you have a voice, speak up." I mean, usually it's a safety matter, but if you see something, say something or whatever, right? And it should be, I think a lot of times we don't teach in the training division how to advocate for ourselves, if that makes sense, especially being females, and Brooke and Chantell being even in more a minority, being, African Americans in the fire service. So what could we, if there's anything we could do to make like fire chiefs or captains or lieutenants understand that we're not just being when we're advocating for ourselves, we're just trying to get a point across.
I think it definitely did not. It was not talked about in my training academy. It wasn't. It was, and this is such a male dominated field, and it's everybody's so stuck in their ways. I think it's hard for people to get out of that, in a sense. Like, everybody is like, well, this is how it's been done for years. Just because it's 2024, like, times have changed so drastically. We can't be stuck in the old ways. I understand the old way worked during that time, but what about this way? Can I show you a different way? I feel like that's what it would take. It would take for people to welcome change, be more acceptable, be more open and willing to learn from others. And again, like, we definitely should incorporate some kind of training that's more inclusive. Definitely more inclusive for women, for minorities, for, you know what I'm saying, for different people, shapes and sizes, different hair types and lengths. And, it just is going to take change. But in this field, it's so hard for people to accept that.
You're right. They're afraid of change. And real quick, and then because Megan and Brooke have their hands up, I think did you have any female instructors in your academy?
I did not. No.
Okay. We'll get back to that. Okay. Megan, I think you had your hand up, and then Brooke.
So, thinking about what everybody's sharing and the questions you're asking and stuff, I think back to early in my career. And for those who aren't aware, I don't do structure. I do wildland fire only.
Megan, you have a lot of background noise.
Yeah, it's called Starbucks.
Okay.
When earlier in my career, I chose to be on a rappel group, and with that, there was a lot of training, quick paced. And one of the things they said was, just like you said, Lisa, was safety. Speak up. You see something, say something. You're having a problem. You don't know how to do the skills. Speak up. But what happens when we speak up, whether we're advocating for ourselves, when we're talking about safety, is all of a sudden we've moved from blending in to standing out. And you open yourself up to that examination. And so I took what they said at face value. I was having difficulty with the skill. And I said, hey, help me out. And instead of helping me out, it became this, how do we pull her down, is what it felt like. So now, because I asked for help, I admitted I wasn't doing well, I admitted I wasn't confident, that now they were just looking and finding all the other mistakes, which I wasn't making any more than the people around me. I was just the one who chose to speak up. And so when you think about it that way, I think one of the first things that we can do is realize how our words and actions don't align. And once we become self-aware that when we say we're open to communication, we want people to speak up, we have to really look and see what our actions are when people do. And that's the thing, I think, when you talk about what can chiefs do, what can our coworkers do, is stop and examine and become self-aware of their own actions in those situations. Because even though they say they value open communication, they value people pointing stuff out, their actions don't align with that. And it's their actions that quiet us, not their words.
Brooke, you had your hand up too.
Yes. I agree with what was said, and then I also disagree with what was said, because it's not a matter of in the fire service that we're talking about.
In general.
Right? It's in general. It's in how we live our lives, and like, you know, this field in particular where people typically love firefighters, right? But when you come into it, right, it's, for me, it just kind of rocked me that this career field that I was so excited to come into and to like be a family, right? Like everyone said. And then I get here and it's like, that's if you look like, you think like, you talk like, it's the majority, then you're accepted and then it's easy, right? And so it's creating space when you don't. And for me, you know, I always think back, and this is the conversations that I was having with my crew, or, you know, just at work, when I was like, okay, we're in the Olympics, we're all here, we're all rooting for the same team, we're all so prideful in you know, USA, like we're all rooting for the same team. I was like, now, are we going to keep that same energy when it comes to these elections that are coming up? You know, because right now it's an opportunity, like it's to like still be able to disagree, but see people for who they really are. Like to see that we all have the same structure inside when we peel back the skin, right? And so remember, guys, when DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, was a buzzword, when it was a big thing. I just like, okay, like, so the fire service is becoming more diverse, right? We know that we're getting different people in, or so we say, like the numbers are changing. Is it where it should be, needs to be? I disagree, right? So they checked off that buzzword of diversity. You come to the inclusion, right? So, okay, we're starting to include some people in some of the topics that we're talking about. It's improving, right? And then we talk about like this equity as well, like making things more equitable. And when I think about those words, I saw a super powerful visual on there where it was like they're sitting at a baseball game. There's a fence in front of the baseball game, and there's boxes, right? Like there's different age groups, so we have the diversity. It's being equitable because there's boxes for people that are shorter and taller, right? And this inclusion. But if we're at the end of the day, what we're all needing to be aiming for is to take the dang fence down. Yeah. Why is there a fence, right? That's what we really need to be aiming towards. Like, have that understanding. We don't need the fence. We need everybody to have the same access. And what we really need to be doing is like really treating each other like family. Yes, families are dysfunctional, but like at the end of the day, like we're going to, you know, do what's necessary. We're going to stand up for, we're going to speak up for family. And so I just think that there's kind of excuses that we're making of why we're not getting the things done, and it needs to stop. Like, we know that the fire service is, everybody's short on how many people we need. And if we don't get with the program that there's a new generation of people coming in, that it matters how you treat people, and they're not going to just accept being treated any kind of way any longer. Yeah. I think the makeup of the fire service is going to be very different, and people are going to be extremely surprised. So that's what I say on that.
No, and I agree with you. I mean, when I came in, it was hazing and to some degree bullying, and it was all accepted, right? It's like it was a joke. Oh, we're doing it because we like it. You know, we're only doing that. We're only doing that too because we like you. And I'm like, I'm not stupid, you know, kind of thing. And you're right. That kind of stopped, right? We had to stop that. But now there's still, to some degree, it's occurring. It's just not as obvious as that it's occurring. And you're right. The new generation firefighter, they're coming in with maybe not the skills that the older generation firefighter came in, like knowing how to use a hammer and all that, but they're coming in with a lot of other skills. And as a fire service, we need to start embracing the skills that they bring in. Like they have computer skills, they have, you know, electronic skills. They have so many different skills that are now more valuable in the fire service really than, I mean, you could show someone in 2 minutes how to use a hammer, right? But I don't think you could show someone in 2 minutes how to, you know, fix a computer if the computer's down, or how to reboot the computer if the computer's down. So you're right. And it's like funny because when I was still working, people were leaving the fire department and going to another fire department, or they were just flat out quitting. And it was like, that was unheard of when I came in the fire service. You didn't leave the fire department I worked at. You didn't quit the fire department just because you didn't like it, right? Because it took generally so long to get hired. And I agree with you. It's just, unless we change our ways, I mean, if you look on any kind of social media platform, you see almost every department across the United States is hiring firefighters. And it's like, there's a reason why it's occurring. I mean, is it that job? I saw somewhere where a department had one time like 4,000 people apply, and this time they had 1,000 people. Well, why? Is anyone trying to figure out why now only 1,000 people want to do it? Like 10 years ago, everybody wanted to be a firefighter. What's the difference? You know, what's the difference of why it's still a profession that people want and aspire to be, but I don't know if it's as much as it was 10 years ago. And I think another way that to help solve some of the problems, maybe, I don't know, but like try to foster a relationship with your allies. And Brooke, you kind of mentioned that about talking about watching the Olympics and then after the Olympics and such, and the election and stuff. But foster, be able to have a conversation with your allies and even people that you don't align with, to find out what their thought process is with certain things, like you said, Brooke. So I think as females and even some males in the fire service, we just want to be so liked and respected and accepted and everything else in the fire service that it does. I mean, okay, I'll do that. Okay, you can say that to me or something. And it has to stop, right? It has to stop. I made a comment last week about, standing up for yourself. And is it easy to stand up for yourself and go and say something's not right? No, it's not. Is it the right thing to do? Yeah. Why? Because it's helping you and it's helping the person that's going to come in after you. And are some people probably not going to like you? Probably not. But did you really want to even like that person or have any respect or hang out with that person to begin with? Is how I always looked at it. So I think that what Brooke, you just made some excellent comments. So especially in the fire service, females, like if you're in a class or even like sitting at the table and someone says something you don't quite understand, we're really hesitant to ask questions. We feel that we're going to be looked down upon and made to feel that we don't belong there. So what can we do about this? Like, let's say we're in a class or you're doing a hands-on training and someone's just saying, that's not going to work. Don't do it this way. Stop. We're going to do it this way or something. Knowing or asking, well, can I try it this way? No, we're going to do it this way. How can we get, not even just in the fire service, but people in general, to feel comfortable kind of stepping outside that box and ask questions and not be intimidated or afraid that I'm going to be looked down upon like I don't know the answer, or why is she asking that question? She should know that answer. Megan, did you have your hand up? Megan, you're on mute. Chantell.
No, but I do have answers.
Okay, go ahead.
Didn't have my hand up.
Okay. All right, what's your answers, Megan?
Okay. I didn't have my hand up, but I always have answers. I think one of the first things when I teach, one of the things I establish, and this is building on know who my audience is. Because I don't know how many times we've heard, there's no stupid question. I mean, how many times have we had that? Pretty much proven that there are such things. And when we joke, bring it up in a joking manner that matches the energy of the audience. Yeah, so this doesn't work in every situation, but basically, I lay it out there. I tell people, don't worry, there is no such thing as a stupid question because I'll laugh at you in front of your face. And it kind of already breaks that ice and sets the tone of acceptance because you just kind of called it out that there are questions that people feel are dumb and won't ask, but you've already kind of welcomed them to step up and say something because you basically said, I'm not going to make fun of you without you knowing, which sounds kind of crass in some ways, but it helps break that ice and starts to warm the audience up to ask those questions. And then my second piece of advice with that, when I'm in a training role, is there are always going to be situations where people do not feel comfortable speaking up or speaking out. And one of the things I highly advocate my trainees to do is to find, for lack of a better word, their bitch buddy, the person that they feel comfortable with, that they can complain to, that they're okay feeling stupid in front of. This is that person, either their peer or maybe somebody above them, that they can pull aside to ask those questions and feel safe doing so that they're not putting social risk on themselves to speak up in front of everybody else and potentially be shunned or looked at as incompetent because it's a question maybe they should know. So trying to find, sometimes you can't make the situation safe for everybody, but to help them find a pathway to find a situation that is psychologically safe where they can answer those questions. Okay, sometimes you gotta get creative.
Okay. Chantell, you had your hand up.
Yes, I actually like that point that she said, find somebody that you're okay with being vulnerable with, that you don't have to always look like or try to, try to put on your best face for somebody that you can go to and say, hey, like, this is where I'm lacking. This is where I need help with. And it's okay to look stupid, but we definitely have to even encourage the ones that come up behind us and let them know, like, hey, I understand. I just had a probie start at my station, very young girl and very small, you know what I'm saying? So like she had problems with like the ladder and, some of the tools, they're heavier. And it's like, okay, I completely understand. I have problems there too. I want you to come to me whenever you're ready to work on those things. Like I try to make it my business, you know what I'm saying, to put my foot forward and let them know, hey, I have a problem with this, and this is what I did to overcome it. So if you have a problem with whatever, I know that I'm here for you. You know what I'm saying? So I try to make it to where they feel comfortable coming to me by letting them know my shortcomings as well. Comfort goes a long way, especially in this service and in life itself. Like, we're not always going to get everything just right. We're not always going to get things the first time, you know what I'm saying? So sometimes these things definitely take trial and error over and over and over again. And finding that person that can definitely be there and you can lean on, asking those dumb questions, or, failing at a skill over and over again, but having that person have your back saying, it's okay. You know what I'm saying? Let's try it this way, or let's try it that way. One thing I can personally say, like I said, I didn't have women instructors, but yes, I was taught, the general way, how the men do it. This is how we do it. This is how, you know what I'm saying? But going to the Women in Fire conference, it was so refreshing to see, okay, this is how another woman does it. She shows a different technique. So that's what I try to bring to not only my women the women that come up behind me, but even the men who are smaller in stature or whatever the case may be, like I try to, okay, well, this is what helped me, so I think that is a really, really good point. Find somebody that you can kind of lean on and look kind of clumsy and stupid, or ask those stupid questions in front of. I love that, because that was me. I'm a goof and I need to figure this out. So I need to make sure I find somebody who is okay with me being a little clumsy, and having them teach me and guide me in the way that I need to go.
Brooke, you had your hand up.
Yes. Hearing those responses, I'm like, this is why I drink my water and I get sleep, because I always like, we're doing things, yes, and it will make a difference. But I'm just like, we need to do more. And how many times and how long are women going to have to be the ones to like take the weight and the burden of always having to be the ones to do this or see another female? For me, we need to get men involved as well, right? To like make people comfortable and opening their eyes to like always look for the one, or always speaking up for other ones. Because I know for me, sometimes it's exhausting, and then I need to like recharge, right? Because I feel like it's always something. And so I drink my water and I get good sleep so that I can come in and deal with these issues. But as far as like the asking questions, we definitely want people to be comfortable, because we just need women to like just step up and get to them before they're stunted, right? Before they have that feeling of, oh, I asked a dumb question, or someone is looking at me like I'm, not capable, and get into them and encouraging them on those aspects, so they can continue to be the leaders in these spaces, and stepping up in a way that, whether it's male or it's female, whatever, like, we're human at the end of it. And so it's not just the asking of questions. Like, I remember having a lieutenant come to me, and he was like, man, it was another woman lieutenant. She hadn't been a lieutenant very long, and she was speaking, and then like they someone else, another officer, cut her off, right? And like wasn't like letting her speak. And he, come back and he's like, oh man, whatever. And I was like, well, did you say something?
Exactly.
Did you step in as another white male to then say, hey, she was talking, like, let her finish. Yeah. And so I asked him that question because it was totally, obviously it bothered you. And you had the ability to then step up for her and give her and create space for her that was due. And I was just like, this is crazy. And she was on your crew before, like, you knew her, like, her, and did not create that space for her. And so sometimes it's like, well, oh, I didn't know. You knew, because it bothered you enough that you came to me and said something about it. So you knew that she probably didn't feel great about it either, right? You knew that she probably felt isolated. And if you didn't know, then I'm going to come to you and challenge you to, like, not let that happen again. So it goes beyond like the discomfort of asking the questions. Like, it's placing that responsibility on everybody, so that we're not the only ones taking that burden, because it gets exhausting and it's tiring. And so a lot of the times, oh, well, they don't know. Like, that's how I go about different situations. Like, I speak up and I say something, and not in a mean way, but just like, And it, like, we're family, like, we're talking, we're having a conversation, and I'll kind of play like devil's advocate, or did you think about it in this aspect, or what if it was this, so that people don't walk away being like, oh, well, maybe they didn't know. Most of the time, the a-holes know that they're a-holes, right? Right? We just like are so quick to say, oh, that's just how they are. That's my least favorite term.
I know.
It is my least favorite term. Because exactly. Just because that's how somebody is doesn't make it okay. It's not okay for them to continue to treat people this way or do things, right? Mm-hmm. And so, like, if we just have the courage, right, to take it a step further, like, we shouldn't be the ones to always take the burden and always be the person that person goes to. We need to start, making it a responsibility of your officer and then their officer, because it really starts like how it should be, right? Is from the top down. And so, yes, we can be in these spaces, but like, even me as a firefighter, I'm always like, well, when I walk into the space, they're just like, well, here she goes again. Because I'm like, some of these topics and the things that we're talking about, it's not a matter of rank. It's a matter of like human, right, element. And so that's just kind of how I approach things, and taking it further from like not wanting to be the one to ask the question. It's let's get back to this family that we say that we are.
Exactly. And I think what we need to do as a fire service, or just in general as a nation, is we got to stop making people that self-advocate for themselves feel uncomfortable. Since you're
yes,
you're self-promoting your own needs and your own goals. It's not like you're doing anything that's outside the norms of what everybody wants their own, their needs met. And so as in the fire service especially, but just in general, I mean, like, you go, like, let me use an example, you go to a restaurant, they bring you the wrong food, or it's not cooked right or something. A lot of times we feel uncomfortable asking, because it's like we're not really self-promoting in a bad way. It's like for your own needs and goods. So I think you're right, it needs to start at the top, and it possibly should maybe even be taught in the academy about, how to self-advocate for yourselves. But you're right, like with the guy, he knew because he came and told somebody. So it's like, but he was afraid that people were gonna, like, make him feel uncomfortable now if he said something. That's probably why he didn't say anything. I'm just, thinking outside the box, but it's just like, it has to stop somewhere. And you're right, it kind of has to start at the top. About everybody, should feel comfortable being able to articulate what their needs are and what their goals are. And it's like, if we can't do that, then you're right. We're not a functional family. We're not a dysfunctional family. We're just a group of 3 or 4 people that have different goals and agendas. And we might go to a fire and the fire might go out, but once we get back to the station, we're all going in 3 or 4 separate ways, because we're all afraid to, talk to each other about anything, because we're self-advocating for our own needs and goals. So I think a quality of a good advocate, I think, is to let others know what's okay and not okay. But once again, that's hard. It's we've talked about it. Like, it's hard to say. If you hear something, what's the thing? If you hear especially when the sexual harassment thing became so prevalent, if you hear something, say something. And a lot of females don't want to do that either, because then they're going to be like, oh, you can't say anything around her. You can't do anything around her. She's going to go tell. And you got to let people know what's okay and not okay. And like I said before, they're either going to like you or they're not going to like you. They're going to respect you or they're not going to respect you. But at least you could look in the mirror and look in the picture facing back or the face looking back at you, that you're doing the right thing. So, Brooke, did you have your hand up again? I know Megan.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, like, on that, because I think that's like a great summary for that as well. And the way that we look at things, right? Like, we can do hard things, right? And everybody's always like, when it comes down to the actual job, like, we got it. But it also seems like it's hard to stand up for people, to advocate for ourselves, to advocate for others. But you can do those hard things too. Even though it's hard, even though it's uncomfortable, you can do it. If you wanted to, you would, right? And so, like, encouraging everyone, because at the end of the day, we're all a part of this fire service, right? We all wear the flag on our shoulders. And so if we can get back to that, like, let's do the hard things, not the hard things that everybody thinks is the hard things, running into burning buildings and doing the EMS and the extrication and all the hard things that we see, right? Continue to do the really hard things and getting back to the human element of it.
Exactly. And I think what you made a point that is something that might be okay for someone else might not be okay for us. So just because someone else doesn't find something offensive or doesn't mean that we're not going to find it offensive. And then we all, like you mentioned, we all have something to offer. We all know the same skills. We all went through a training division, a recruit academy, whatever you want to call it, and we all obtained the same skills in that academy. So when we all walk in the door the first day of our first station or whatever, we're all coming in there with the same skill set. I mean, somebody might have took another class or whatever, but the skill sets that you were taught in the training division that are under your policies and procedures for your own agency, we all have those. But each person has a little bit something to offer, and we all have a voice, and we need to be able to feel comfortable advocating for ourselves without the backlash in the back of our minds of, if I say something, then they're not going to like me, or if I say something, they're going to think I don't know what I'm talking about. Megan, you had your hand up. Megan?
I did. I think one of the things we tend to underrate is we tend to talk about speaking up or addressing issues, advocating ourselves as something as simple as I just speak up. But there's a lot of research out there that shows when women behave or act in ways that are somewhat considered masculine, particularly in leadership roles, it actually works negatively against us. And in particular, that advocacy, hey, look at me, I'm doing great things, I deserve some credit, that does not align with an unconscious expectation of women being caregivers and taking care of others. And so even though we may be speaking up and saying things the way our male counterparts do, it's been shown through research that it's not received the same way and can actually work against us in our endeavors. And so that's one of the things I take into account when I'm going to speak up for myself. It's how do they expect me to act, and how can I basically strategically say the same things, but say them with words and manners that they unconsciously expect from a woman. And that's a lot of mental work. And so sometimes I just rather not put forth that effort.
And it is sad that what you just said does occur and that it occurs, but it does occur. And it's like, I don't know how we could ever, there's a way to change it. I don't have the answer, but you're right. It's like you say something on the radio and then it's like, oh, she was screaming on the radio when you weren't screaming on the radio, or at the scene, you raise your voice a little bit. Oh, she was yelling and stuff like that. It's like, no, they were screaming, not, so it's like somehow it has to start at the top, like Brooke said earlier. And I don't know if it entails having a class or whatever, but since it's still a male dominated job, how can we come together to make a difference? It's not like it was brought up earlier, men need to be able to advocate for themselves as well and not feel uncomfortable. So how do we come together and make everyone feel comfortable, especially females in a male-dominated job, feeling comfortable to be a self-advocate for themselves? How do you, Chantell, you mentioned, you have new female in your station or whatever. So I'm sure you're like mentoring her and talking to her and saying, if you say something or she could come to you and such. But as a fire service in general, what do we do? How do we change this? Is it even changeable?
It's hard.
It's very hard, and I think it's hard to speak up for yourself. But like I keep saying, when you look in the mirror and the person looking back at you, if you could know you did the right thing to speak up for something and be able to advocate for yourselves. And I mean, especially if something's not correct. I mean, we talked about classes and stuff, but if something's not correct, if someone's calling you a name or they're calling you an angry female, or, I mean, that's the point where it has to stop. And so, I mean, that's where I think, Brooke, you kind of hit on it a little bit. You have to affirm your value. You have to, you have to let them understand your position, that no, this isn't okay for me. It might be okay for Sarah over there, but it's not okay for me. And
Yeah.
and set boundaries. You have to set boundaries. I mean, you have to be assertive but clear in how you communicate. So it's letting them know. I mean, they might even come back and say, well, she didn't have a problem with it. Why do you have a problem with it? Well, these are my boundaries. This is what I feel, and it's sad that we even have to do that in 2024, is set these boundaries of what's acceptable and not acceptable in the fire service.
Very sad.
So we are about out of time. Does anyone have anything else they would like to add?
Real quick, I had a comment on the last question. I think you asked the question of how can we come together and make a difference. And I truly believe by doing things like this, by developing networks and relationships with others and really sharing your personal experiences, if you're at a place where you can, because I know for me, I wasn't as willing or comfortable being my own advocate when I was newer, and I put up with a lot of things that now that would never fly, but that took time, that took experience and growth for me. And that's something that I've had to work on and work through to get to the point now and how I go about things today. And, I really hope no one's ever made to feel uncomfortable. But again, like we've said throughout this, if you see something, say something, and then ask how you can help. Ask them what's going on. And if they're willing to share, just listen. Sometimes it might be an actionable item that you can help them with. And sometimes they just need to be able to talk and get it out and work through it in a sense. So, just look out for each other, regardless of the rank, regardless how much time you've had or served. And if you are at a place in the career where you can make some executive decisions, just, know your people and if they're going through something. And if you hear anything and you're able to stop that behavior and you tell them that's unacceptable, like we've said, it starts with the leadership. This is what we're not going to tolerate. This is what is acceptable. And just go about that and just be there in whatever position you're at. Be a good self-advocate for yourself, walk the walk. But I mean, what is it? Don't just talk the talk, also walk the walk, be an example for others, and just challenge those around you and educate them. Sometimes people just don't know. They just don't know what they did was wrong or offensive because nobody's ever educated them that it was. So just learning how to do it and doing it appropriately, being respectful when you address things and having those courageous conversations, I think will go a long way.
Megan, you have your hand up. You got 30 seconds.
I would say you want to know how we move forward as a group is we can't fight the battle alone. If we rely on the people who are negatively impacted to make all the changes, then it's never going to change because we simply don't have the numbers. So fighting together, that's my answer.
Thank you, Megan. So thank you to all my guests for being a part of the radio show. Thanks to Fire Engineering for allowing us to be part of your podcast. Thanks to all the listeners and members of Women Fire. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, and check out our website at womeninfire.org. Thank you again, everybody.
Attention first responders, ready for a new challenge? You can turn your leadership skills into deliciousness by becoming a Firehouse Subs restaurant owner. First responders will receive a $100,000 cash incentive to help open their restaurant. Continue serving after service. Visit firehousesubsfranchising.com today.
Breathing in diesel exhaust fumes is like walking into a fire without a mask. Over time, those toxins lead to cancer. Protect yourself with Magnegrip, the easiest, most reliable exhaust removal system that features a true 100% seal to eliminate diesel exhaust fumes. To get free grant assistance, visit magnegrip.com.